we've just heard, our community's bold goal is to uplift 15,000 families out of poverty, and that's part of a much larger movement. So it's not just here, it's also happening nationally. So the national leader at the forefront of that movement is with us today, and her name is Kiran Handa Guadioso, and she's the Chief Executive Officer of United Way of Northern New Jersey and President of the United for Alice Project, which is a national initiative uniting United Ways and corporations, foundations, and others across 39 states to drive data-driven change for hardworking families. Under her leadership, United Way has advanced its mission to improve life for Alice and those in poverty through strategic planning, research, and innovation. During the pandemic, she launched the Alice Recovery Fund and United in Care, which was an innovative child care pilot that Governor Phil McMurphy later appointed her co-chair of a council to guide kind of statewide recovery efforts, so very impressive. Kiran previously served as the interim CEO and vice president of program operations at New Jersey After 3 and directed mentoring and enrichment programs at Sponsors for Educational Opportunity in New York City. Earlier in her career, she served as a policy advisor under Governor James Florio, helping to establish AmeriCorps in New Jersey. She holds a BA in Political Science and Policy Studies from Maxwell Schools at Syracuse University and an MA in Political Science from Rutgers University's Eagleton Institute of Politics. So please join me in welcoming Kiran, who will deliver our keynote address at the end of the day and who is now moderating our next panel on building pathways to financial stability. So, Kiran.
Good morning. How's everybody? Excellent. I'm so happy to be here with you today. So happy I get to spend time with the incredible DJ Hampton, who is the CEO here. I got to brag on him for just 2 seconds. He's a legend, all right, if you don't know DJ, but he is a legend. And when we talked about me coming to Charleston for this event last spring, it was a yes before the sentence even came out of his mouth, because there's nothing I wouldn't do for him and this incredible team here. So grateful for each and every one of you. So thank you for having me. I think my job is to bring up the rest of our panelists. Yes, okay, terrific. Well, our first panelist is the one and only DJ, President and CEO of Trident, United Way, who just shared this incredible, bold goal, which we're going to talk more about throughout the day and beyond. Stephanie Moreau, who is the Homeownership Resource Director at Origin, South Carolina, and a financial empowerment leader dedicated to breaking cycles of poverty and creating pathways to homeownership across South Carolina. She's got nearly 2 decades of experience in mortgage lending, counseling, nonprofit leadership, and she combines her expertise as a HUD HCM, which is a certified housing counselor, and a licensed MLO with deep personal commitment to equity, dignity, and generational opportunity. And then finally, Dr. Kendra Stewart, Professor of Political Science and Public Administration and Director of the Riley Center for Livable Communities at the College of Charleston, where her research focuses on state and local government, food and environmental policy, and government communications. Kendra is a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration and past president of the American Society for Public Administration. She's also a frequent political analyst for national media outlets and the co-editor of the Practice of Government Public Relations. So please join me in welcoming this incredible panel. Are we ready? Everybody settled and ready? All right. So this is an incredible opportunity, bringing together various perspectives around issues for Alice. I think my first question is for you, DJ. So it's been about 2 years since you and your United Way really led bringing the Alice framework to South Carolina. How has being part of the Alice movement and the Alice data, tools, analytics really changed the way that Trident United Way approaches affordability challenges and financial stability in this community?
Thanks, Kiran. And so What I love about the Alice framework is it puts a number on what people were seeing in reality. 2 years and 3 months ago when I moved here, we were trying to understand what was happening. And it was a little bit of like a steel magnolias. We don't talk about death because it's unpleasant. We don't talk about the challenges hardworking families are experiencing because it's kind of unpleasant. Many employers hadn't wanted to face it, and many of individuals in the community didn't want to kind of shine a light on it. And what Alice did is it allowed us to take real numbers and put it and tell the real story of what's happened. As recently as 2005, you could afford to live here on federal poverty line, but costs have gone up far faster than wages. And what it has allowed us to do is it not only crystallized the need, but it allowed our board and others to make decisions that if we're going to really uplift families, we've got to go all in on a deeper focus. And that deeper focus is, how do we help Alice thrive? And so I've got to say to my board, thank you. For those in the room, one of my board members mind raising your hand or standing up so we can just say thank you? Thank you for being brave and being bold. Because once Alice was brought here, they said we have to do more. And so it has allowed us to move forward, but it's also allowed us to engage the community in ways that we hadn't before. Specifically, how do we all become part of the solution to this? And so it's really been helpful in that regard.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Kendra, so last year, the Riley Center led a series of community conversations around poverty in the Tri-County area. Can you talk a little bit about that? Share some of the details, anything that surprised you and the Riley Center in that process?
Sure. We had a lot of really great takeaways from those, and I know I've already seen many people in the room, including my colleague next to me who participated in those. And so, it was really exciting to have so many people. We have so many smart people in this region working on really hard problems, but we often get stuck in our area of work because we're doing important things. And, we were, after several sessions, able to really coalesce around 3 things that people felt like these are the things that keep people from really becoming successful or becoming financially stable. And those were the housing issues that people face, employment issues, and then the issue of the income and financial resiliency or stability. And so there was, this nice agreement around those, and the thought of, one of the big takeaways, I guess, is the challenge of we really need to change the narrative. And I think that's what the United Way is trying to do with this, that redefining poverty and thinking about how we can address the issues for the folks who fall within the gaps of the services that our regions offer, that our region already offers, and that we are very successful in addressing issues with people who are in crisis, but how do we get to that next level of folks who are sometimes financially stable and sometimes, one little thing we saw today in the exercise can put someone back. So we had some great conversations around that and a real coalescing around those major issues.
Thank you. Certainly issues that are obviously very relevant here, but we see all over the country. So thank you for sharing that. So Stephanie, so from your perspective, being very much embedded in community, local neighborhoods, what are you seeing in this community, and then what do you think about this unified, bold goal? What are your thoughts and reactions, and how do you think it will help specifically the families that you work with?
Well, we are definitely seeing that those families are working very, very hard, and they are still struggling to keep up and make ends meet. As you were saying, as the expenses continue to rise and their wages don't go up, there becomes a gap that gets created that it's our job to step in and fill. And I definitely agree that this new approach that we all need to take a part and a role in helping our community move to a thriving environment, because not any one of us can really solve the problem. For example, if we have a client that comes to us and wants us to help them with their rent, maybe we might have grant funds to help cure that, but the real problem is that they've lost their job. We don't have the skills or the training or the resources to help them through that. We can do a soft handoff to a community partner, but we don't really know unless the client actually stays with us and follows up and confirms that they went through and gained access to services through that referral. So it's a very loose system.
Thank you. I appreciate you calling out kind of the disconnectedness in the system. That's a challenge everywhere. So I think the model of family coaches is going to really help with that. Kendra, back to you. Can you talk about kind of the value of the research and how it brings together folks from different silos and what you're seeing around that process, in particular around the issues of employment, housing, asset building?
Sure. Like Stephanie, most folks who are working in the field have, the perspective of what's happening in their communities. They have a lot of great anecdotes and they see the stories in real life. And so being able to collect and see the data and really understand, just what was shared earlier today with DJ and Joey, like seeing the numbers and the reality of what folks are facing helps really allows us to put a point in time on where we are and to help us then determine where it is we want to go. And so having a shared outcome or a shared goal is something that we can get by all agreeing on, here's where we are today, here's what the data says, where is it that we need to be in order to address the reality of our community and the reality of what's happening in our region right now, whether it's the housing crisis or the growing cost of living and all of those types of things. So the research helps us to understand the problem. And the other piece of research that we've been able to do here is learn from others. So we've looked at what other United Ways are doing around the country and learn from their successes as well as their challenges. And really to help people come together to say, there are things that have worked in other places that we can learn from, and what is it that will work for us where we can add to this story and be hopefully in just a few years, we'll be somebody's case study of what success looks like.
I love that. I love that vision, and I think you already are. I can't wait to tell everyone and talk about the work that's happening here. So I think you've already checked half of that box, I think. So DJ, back to you. You obviously, a few minutes ago, really laid out the bold goal of 15,000 families and the strategy to get there. But can you talk a little bit about what's going to have to happen next, and what that means for the nonprofit community, and how you're going to see kind of a domino effect of impact coming from that decision?
Well, thank you, Kiran. And what I'm going to say is that essentially we couldn't have picked a better time to transition. And honestly, if we would have made this spin earlier, we'd be much better positioned as a community. Why? For all of my nonprofit partners in the room, and there's a lot of you, raise your hand if you're trying to figure out how you do more with less right now. Yeah. It is a theme. As we've seen, some donors are scared, others are very excited about the economy. Federal grants are being cut left and right. We as a tri-county have to be much more effective in how we move forward as a nonprofit sector. This idea that we're going to have a whole lot of resources coming in from external sources, while there are foundations out there, is going to be increasingly less likely. And so if we are seeing need going up, it's about how do we all work together to make this a more efficient? How do we make sure that handoff is not cold, it's warm? How do we make sure a person got the services and it's tracked? And what was the philanthropic ROI on that so that our partners and us and others can go out and actually drive more funds to fund the work that's working? But more importantly, so many nonprofits are doing incredible work, but there's a disconnect between getting the people who need the services most to them and them being able to provide it. And so by increasing the efficiency, by having a family coach who walks alongside and makes sure that they're to the right nonprofit at the right time, that nonprofit's able to provide the sources of referrals, and that their employers and businesses and county is all in line with supporting them, is really what's going to have to happen if we're going to tackle this. Because the simple reality is, if you're a family of 4 with a kid in childcare and you're making less than $88,000 in the Tri-County, you're Alice and you're making tough decisions as a household. And we can't afford to let the system continue to be as inefficient as it has been. And so that's really, honestly, what I'm most excited about in this, is the ability for us to act collectively in a much more smarter, efficient way and really help lift the families up over time instead of single-serving crisis interventions. The other thing I will flag is that most nonprofit services cap out somewhere along a multiple of the federal poverty line. Let's say it's 2 times, so around $60,000 a household income. That means anyone making between $60,000 and $90,000 or the $88,000 it costs to live here is essentially not being served. And by us lifting up and figuring out ways we as a Tri-County can serve those folks is what's going to help us make sure that this community can move forward in a thriving way. And so we're just grateful for you, all of the nonprofit partners who are here, who's talking about this journey with us. Our goal is to have MOUs and agreements in place in the next 6 months, and really to have that system up and running in a way that is able to move people to the best provider when they need it and how they need it.
Thank you. I think you gave a really good kind of snapshot of what this looks like. So Stephanie, would love to hear from you. What's your reaction to what DJ just kind of laid out in terms of what will emanate from this bold goal, and what do you think it'll mean for your organization, the work you do, and the families you serve?
Well, I think it'll bring us all closer together. I think if we're all sort of to collectively looking at the client and joining in the objective of getting this household stabilized, and not just stabilized, but to a point where they're able to learn how to manage their own crises in the future. That would be beyond just stabilizing them and fixing the problem that they're facing immediately, and going deeper into the root of what actually caused that problem and solving the problem, so that we actually are uplifting these households out of poverty. Because otherwise we're just helping them temporarily, and then they're going to be right back needing help again soon in the future.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the kind of opportunity to work together in sort of deeper, richer ways. And DJ, I've heard you say a few times since I've been here, but talking about efficiency, which I think is something we all strive for, we all think about, but often it's hard to operationalize when you're talking about people, right? And families and day-to-day stresses and changes. I think about the Mentimeter, all of the words that were populated in that last slide, right? All of those things drive what's happening and impacting our families. And we as nonprofits trying to serve are managing all of that in a way that sometimes we just can't, right? And we have to kind of start with what's the most immediate, and then look, to your point, to kind of build efficiencies in the system to help families. Would love to hear back to you, Kendra, to talk a little bit about, from a systems perspective, what are some, kind of lasting shifts that you hope will be here kind of in a permanent way once we get to 2035 and 15,000 families?
Sure. Well, one of the things we did come across, which was very hopeful, is that the number of folks who were very interested in working together. This community is not one where, even though we do often operate in silos, it's not always intentional. And there's a recognition of, folks like Stephanie, that I really can help someone find housing, but I can't help them find a job. And so I need someone else who can do that. And so as Trident United Way shifts their focus and becomes hopefully maybe somewhat of the bridge for some of that, that's really been welcomed among all of the folks we've been talking to. And it's not territorial. People, we're all here generally trying to solve the same problem, and that has been so inspiring and encouraging. We might approach it differently. We might be very laser focused on one aspect of the problem, but the connection to being part of this bolder goal or this broader outcome has been very, I think, exciting to folks, and that's been very inspirational for us. And for our challenge now has been trying to figure out, okay, now that we've got a bold goal, what does that mean? And how down the road can we determine if we're moving towards that, or how we're moving towards that, and where we're doing well and where we need some help? And I think about, in our region, we do have a model for this having happened before, because one of the things we've heard from nonprofits is they can't do it alone. That this is something that we need others to step in. We need the business, the private sector, we need the government sector, we need all of us to work together on this and taking a regional approach. And we have done this here before. Many of us weren't here, but a number of decades ago, when they shut down the Navy base in Charleston, and I know some of you were here, that this was a real crisis for our region. And some organizations like the Charleston Regional Development Alliance and the Chamber of Commerce and the United Way stepped up and said, we need to think and deal with this in a regional way. And we're one of the few communities that actually thrived after something like this happened. And it was because of how we pulled together, because we created a plan, we set some goals and outcomes, and we've all worked together to do that. And so I really think now is the time that this is going to happen again, but for a different group of folks. And I think it will get us to that next level.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing back to the what happened with the naval base closing. I think it's oftentimes we forget that, we've been through things, difficult times in our community and our economy before, and we do have some best practices and examples. So thank you for calling that out. And that's pretty incredible that you were here. Were you maybe like 5 years old, I guess?
I wish. I was actually working in state government in Columbia, and so I got to help tell the story of how Charleston was recovering. And it's been fun to be part of the iterations that are after that. So,
Thank you. So Stephanie, a question for you as we're getting close to time, but also just looking ahead, what do you think a thriving, financially stable community would look like, and in particular from your family's perspective?
I would say fewer households living paycheck to paycheck, more renters moving into homeownership, just people overall performing better at work because they're not worried about what's happening in their finances at home.
I think I really appreciate you calling out the worry, right? We know, right? The data tells us, and health data tells us, when we think about social determinants of health and how it all impacts, the number one indicator of physical and mental health over the course of someone's life is poverty. And obviously zip code is a big piece to that. So I appreciate you calling that out, and we know that that's an issue across the country. So DJ, coming to you, if you close your eyes, right, and you fast forward to 2035, what does success look like from a either macro perspective or a very tactical kind of a micro lens? You pick what you want to share, but what does this look like if you close your eyes?
So I've got 30 minutes, right? No.
Actually, I don't know where the team is. Right.
2 minutes. So two lenses, I would say. The first is for those families who are affected by this type of a program, being able to have a Charleston that continues to thrive. And I think maintaining the identity of what it means to be Charleston and celebrating our past, while also making sure that we have the right supports in place for those families. And that if we're able to, as a collective community of businesses, community leaders, nonprofits, government, all come together to make that happen, we're going to have some incredible stories to tell. But more importantly, we will have a workforce in a Charleston that continues to thrive. Because if we do nothing about this right now, it is going to be really hard to keep this economy going. And so that is the first thing, that we look back 10 years from now and we said, we all came together to make sure a base closure, which could have been devastating, doesn't happen simply because we didn't react fast enough or collectively enough to support those who keep our economy going. Because it's the children right now of those families who will be coming into the workforce at that time that we need to make sure are properly positioned. And so that's why the word families is in that goal. The second lens, though, is the look back and the external story. Our goal with our partners will be to share data on a public dashboard transparently. How many families improved a credit score? What was an improvement in average debt to income ratio? How many people were able to get additional benefits at work that they otherwise would have had? And what's the collective value of those benefits? Who signed up for new state benefits? Looking back and seeing the incredible impact it had on so many families, and also sharing the data why people fell backwards in that same time frame. Right. Us being able to, as a community, gather that data with our partners at the Chamber and the Riley Center and CRDA and others, telling that story means future employers want to move here because they know we're taking care of ours, but more importantly, we're able to look back and say, what would we continue to change and adapt and evolve? And so if we could look at those two lenses, those who were affected, and how we would track, measure, and quantify it, I think would be the outcome we'd all be looking for, because that would truly be game-changing for us as a community.
I think you called out two of the essential elements of really successful collective impact, right? Shared measurement and a focus on families, our clients, our customers. So I think I'd love for you each to think about, who's in the room here today, and what is your call to action? So what's one thing that folks here in the room listening today and enjoying this conversation, hopefully, right? Everybody's enjoying this conversation? Okay. What's one thing that you would ask folks to do as they're leaving here today?
I think it's time for us to build a bridge and join forces and come together to provide our community what they need to sustain it for the long time.
I would say let's be open to new ideas and try something innovative.
And let's do it all together. Let's share data. Let's share resources. Let's figure out how we collectively make this happen. And for policymakers, how do we put better rules and policies in place that support families? For employers, how do we provide increased flexibility at work as well as the benefits the employees need? It's not just about wages. It's about a whole other pieces. And then for all of the nonprofits in the room, how do we roll up our sleeves together to improve this efficiency, share data, and make things happen? And so that'd be my call.
Thank you. Thank all three of you. I would just add, so often we care, right? We're called to this work because we feel passion. We feel it in our hearts. We care. We may have been Alice ourselves, or we've been in this community for a very, very long time. We care, but we're not really sure where to help. We may not be leading and running a nonprofit that's providing a service. We may not. We're not sure, or we have a question. So I would invite folks to just reach out and say, I want to help. I'm not really sure. I think that's where bridges are built, new ideas are creative, innovations happen. And I would even invite, even if you have an idea that's not fully baked or you think could be a disruption, we were talking last night at dinner about the importance of disruption, that's really when real change can happen. And sometimes those conversations are uncomfortable and we're not sure and we feel a little hesitant, but those are the conversations that need to happen to accomplish all three of the things that were just articulated by this incredible panel around what success looks like. I don't know if we have time for a Q&A. We do. Okay, terrific.
Hello, my name is Fatima. I work with Charleston Habitat for Humanity. One of my questions was about the building of our community. So my organization pretty much goes through the thriving part. We are very rarely in the part where people are struggling. And so I don't get to see the folks when they're struggling. But I think that building the coaches and having a coaching team where I know where they're coming from in the struggle when we're working with folks like Stephanie all over the time, and then being in the thriving part, but still having the connection to where they came from struggle. So we kind of know how to get them help when they are maybe backsliding or something like that. And I would love to find out how we are planning to bring us thriving people into the struggle so that we know how to best help them once we get them.
It's a fantastic question, and I so appreciate you calling that out. DJ, you want to grab that?
I would love to. I think that there's not only a spot at the table, but there is a huge need. As people move on the continuum, we're going to use, for those of the wonks in the room, the Arizona Self-Sufficiency Standards to qualify folks. As we move them to the right on the continuum, they're going to have to come out of that to have continued the supports they need. It would make incredible sense to have warm handoffs to those groups who could continue that journey and help improve either their household income or decrease their household costs, which is what Habitat does so beautifully. So not only is there a spot at the table, I think you have to be at the table. How do you become part of the pipeline that as people move to the right, they're feeding up to you so they can continue their journey? Because honestly, costs are going to continue to go up here. People want to live here. Wages will hopefully continue to go up. We've had the most wage increase in the last 5 years and the previous 20 years combined, but it hasn't met the cost. So we still need solutions that once people get above that $90,000 to $110,000 income, they can continue to have those supports. That is a long-term bridge. By lowering household costs, you free up money for them to do savings or other things. You have to be at the table. Would love to continue that dialogue. And by the way, all doing great work, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any hands up elsewhere in the room? Right here in front, table 4. Thank you.
So we've heard a lot about collaboration, and I mean, it's all we hear as we tackle anything from affordable housing, transportation issues, childcare issues. But the truth of the matter is, especially because this is a regional issue, each county really becomes territorial in serving the needs of its own constituents. So how do we break through that to not just look like we're collaborating, but actually collaborating? I used to be a journalist, so that's why.
Way to put us on the spot, Natalie.
Give it to me, Kendra.
You know, that's the $1 million question, right? And one of the ways that happens is when our public officials start hearing from their constituents more that this is important. And I will say, I mean, compared to 20 years ago, this region, from the political perspective, has become a lot more collaborative than it was. I remember when we first started having these conversations, you know, there was one county that felt the squeeze of affordability and housing a lot more. And I mean, 10 years ago, Berkeley County leadership was like, there's no affordable housing issue. And today, they have really come around, right? And if you even look at the statistics for tomorrow, that is very, I think, eye-opening for those folks who are in what traditionally had been our more rural regions. They are now coming to terms with the fact that, I mean, the majority of housing in Berkeley County, we are going to see over the next 20 years more housing built than in Charleston and Dorchester put together. However, the majority of jobs are still going to be in Charleston County. What does that mean for this region? And I think that our leaders are really starting to recognize this and starting to see that we're only going to be able to address these issues regionally. And I think there has been some movement. Some of us have been working in this area for a while, like our COG, and you know, some I've already mentioned before, trying to get the leadership to come along. And suddenly, I think there is, you know, they're realizing if they don't address it now, that down the road, we're only going to have, you know, worse challenges than we're facing right now. So I think it really helps when traffic's bad. That gets people paying attention. Unfortunately, but it is something like that, right? I don't know if you all have anything to add.
You sure? Yeah, I lost my thought. Oh, I'm so sorry. I've got to say, this is one of the most collaborative communities I've ever been in. I've been in a lot of communities where it's collaboration, where nonprofits don't actually work together. They compete, and they're nice, but it's not nice. This community, though, has so many groups that are working on this. You know, BCDCOG looking on the vision and figuring out where things are mapped out. You look at the Dorchester Chamber of Commerce, who's leading an entire visioning plan for the county. Our chamber here in the Tri-County, they're all working together to map it out. And when you go to a meeting there, you see the same groups talking about it, and each group is taking a lead. Collectively, there is enough work happening where if we're continuing, again, back on that theme of doing more than less, to leverage the power of us working together, we've got all the necessary ingredients. And so what I'm seeing happening organically is not only our mayors working together, the counties are working together, groups are coming together. We're at a lot of those tables. Grateful, thank you for inviting us, sharing data, but other groups are too. That's how we get there, is by groups stepping up, taking the lead, and continuing to do it. But more importantly, tying and uniting all the different efforts. So it isn't just one group working on housing. You've got the CRDA combining with the chamber, combining with the counties on it. You've got all the counties coming together around volunteer operating emergencies and disasters, VOAD groups. How do we coordinate? That type of work, because I think that's how it's going to happen, because we're more united as a community than people realize. But again, I'm encouraged by how many groups are willing to work together and be at the table together on it.
And I just wanted to add that I think as we continue down this collaboration avenue, it's going to become a shift of, that's not my client, it's our client. And I think that'll be the big movement there.
I also think, you know, a couple of thoughts. I love your question. Just to add, obviously, I'm a guest in the community, but this is an issue everywhere. In New Jersey, we have 21 counties. We have 616 school districts. I was sharing with DJ, I cover 5 counties. I have 220 mayors. we have school districts without schools. I mean, we are the birthplace of home rule and lack of shared responsibility in our state. So I feel this with you, and I think a couple things. I think this is the perfect role for United Way. And, you know, United Way is that trusted voice and does have the ability to, and it amazes me how well we can do this across the country, but we can bring folks in from different sectors. We invite folks to meetings. I'm sure the United Way folks here, DJ, and they come. Like, it's unbelievable to me. They actually come and they show up and they want to be at the table because there is the recognition of what United Way does in community cross-sector. And then the other thing I also encourage you all to think about is don't discount the importance of building trust. Don't assume that trust is in the room when you get into a meeting to negotiate the MOU and how you're going to collaborate. Don't assume it. Assume that folks are there with, you know, good purpose, good mission, good intentions, but don't assume there's real trust, because that's when we assume it, that's where we trip ourselves up and we forget about things. And then when things do go awry, which they will, there will be mistakes. Funding will not be evenly distributed one time. A client may get lost in the shuffle. You know, there will be problems. And then all of a sudden, the trust that was maybe there a little bit is fully imploded, and you got to bring people back. So I would say when you start the full integration and planning mode together, really focus on building trust, and whatever that looks like, I think is really important. Anyway, those are just closing thoughts there. But we have time for one more? Is that okay? This will be our last. Thank you.
Good morning. First of all, it's so good to hear this information on today. I don't know about anybody else, but it's music to my ears. But my name is Nefertari, and I'm the CEO of a nonprofit, Healing Hurts Ministries. And one of the things that you mentioned just now about not assuming, I think this is a good spot to ask this question when it comes to family coaches. One of the things that I recognize with the families that I serve is that there are resources that may be available, but there's no bridge to where they are. So when it comes to the family coaches, is this going to be an opportunity where coaches are actually placed in areas where we're meeting them at those emergency needs so that we can get them connected to the right resources?
Okay, I think you've hit it right on the nose. The idea is not only overlaying the ALICE data with other GIS mapping that we've been doing with groups like Low Country Food Bank and others to identify where there's density of ALICE. And if you haven't been to our website, go to tuw.org/ALICE. All of the data I'm talking about is available in Tableau. It's done even down to administrative district. It's done to the city level, but it's also done by congressional districts. So if you want to engage your delegates, go right ahead. But the idea there is we'll look at that data. We'll also look at where partners are, and those family coaches will go where ALICE is. We're starting where there's high densities of ALICE populations, obviously, or where there's a lack of services. So think Wadmalaw, think downtown, think other locations that you think would be dense with nonprofit services but aren't. Then we're also looking to go where ALICE is. Church, school, libraries, home, where they are, and trying to figure out how we get there. Because the idea that an ALICE family is going to be able to take off a whole day of work and lose wages to go to a center for us or a nonprofit partner is probably gone. So how do we have that virtual option? And virtual means just as high quality. I just want to be clear on that. To them available, so then they can get the bridge, and I love that word, right to where they need to be. And so we'd love to talk to you. We imagine family coaches might not even be our employee. They could be the employees of partners here in the audience, but we agree to work the same way, share the same data, and go through the same process so that we're maximizing the ability of that family to be a bridge to where they need to go. Does that answer your question? It's a great question.
Excellent. All right. Okay, one more. Okay. I think in the back. Oh, now we have a few hands up.
So my question is about the gap. So we talk a lot about ALICE, right? And the literature shares a lot about what ALICE is. But we don't quite talk about what ALICE is not, especially in this region where there's tremendous growth, there are pockets of tremendous income. When you look on places like Zillow, you see more million-dollar homes in the Charleston area than you find $250,000 or $300,000 homes. If you're looking in if you're looking in what's that place called? Holly Hill, you find the $300,000 homes. So what is the gap? What are we trying to close? And what does that really look like? Because I'm trying to figure it out myself.
Sherry, asking the hard questions. I mean, no, I think that's a great question. And I think there's different types of gaps we've been talking about. And one is the Alice gap is what we've been looking at mostly, which is this idea that there's a lot of people offering services here to support people who fall below the federal poverty level. And there's not as many folks offering the services to support the Alice constrained families, right? The folks who have two incomes, who their family household income doesn't sound crisis worthy, but based on the way our economy has grown and the cost of living here, it is that people making good wages today can't necessarily afford to live here without one thing putting them really back. And so I think a lot of the conversations we've had has been more focusing on that gap, like how do we get services to folks who are employed, who have good jobs. And in fact, one of the things we found in our examination of the community is that most of the folks in this room who work in nonprofit, our organizations are not paying enough to get people out of that. And in fact, in this region, the average nonprofit worker does not make enough to support an individual or a family of four. So, thinking it's hard for us to think about the fact that, there's a lot of professionally employed people here who can't, become financially stable or resilient because our wages have not kept up with the cost of living, has been mentioned earlier. But your bigger question, too, about this larger gap is a great question and is something we don't have a good answer to yet, is how do we see the wealth moving into this community as an opportunity to make sure all ships are rising? And I don't know the answer to that. I think that's a great question. And I don't know, maybe DJ or Stephanie
I don't have the magic bullet answer either. What I can say is that an Alice survival budget gives us at least a roadmap of how we need to respond collectively. Who's going to take the lead on housing? Childcare is a huge challenge. We have one of the poorest childcare systems. So if you're a mom, who mostly falls on women, needing childcare so you can go to work, if you can't get affordable childcare, you're not going to go. And let's be honest, you saw the numbers earlier. You got 2 kids in childcare, that's more than your mortgage or your rent. It is a huge problem. Food costs continuing to go up, healthcare costs going up. There isn't one solution at all. The gap has so many different facets. And so what we've realized is a very complex challenge requires, and I hate to say this, a complex answer. It's going to be which organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, government, can come together on each of those areas, tackle the components, and get people to help out on those. Because what will happen is we can have the best services in the world around housing, and if all we focus on is housing, that'll just offset the costs, and they'll have to then, money that they would have saved there is just going to go to pay an electric bill, or going to go to pay food costs, or going to go to childcare. So we have to be much more thoughtful on how we string those programs together, but we also have to be thinking collectively about what are we going to do to support one another in that process. Employers, how are they looking at keeping their workforce going? The government partners we have, what are the policies and procedures that are causing either costs for everything from housing to insurance costs to go up? Where are the systemic pieces we can come together and work on? If we focus a lot on hunger, for example. If we fed everybody, again, money would just go to pay for their utility bills. So how do we address the gap as a thoughtful way and use the Alice roadmap there as an honest way of approaching it would be my answer.
Thank you. I 2 comments to offer to that question, and it really is a fantastic question. I think the Alice survival budget really tells you what the Alice measure offers as an alternative to the federal poverty level, so anyone earning below the Alice survival budget. And then that 38% includes poverty. So it's a combined number. Anyone falling below, we call it the BAT, the below Alice threshold. But then we also have the sustainability budget. So I think that might be getting to a little bit of what the question was asked around, what does it take for a family to be stable in this community? And that's a number that you can drive towards when you think about, helping families lift above Alice. Where do you want to get them, and where do they need to stay in order to be able to afford housing and all the other items? And then the other thing I offer, and I talk a lot about with folks that are, well above the Alice threshold, and it sounds like that's really a significant amount of the movement and the population growth that's happened here, certainly, is we talk a lot about the economics and the larger economy in a community like this. And the Alice population, the Alice demographics, the number, the data, those are all really important and give us insights. But at the end of the day, we need Alice workers. They are a mainstay in our economy: childcare, home health aides, retail, service, right? The Alice workers, I don't care how much AI is out there, we are never going to have an economy where we don't need the Alice workforce. And when you start having those conversations with folks at different income brackets, maybe with a different lens, maybe a different experience, it really changes the conversation around gap. Because what we're talking about is, certainly the 15,000 bold goal, but it's also what's happening in our economy structurally, systemically, because we are in a situation where we need to figure out how to structure the economy so that everyone can afford to take care of their family at the end of the day. And that's really what it's about. Okay, great. Thank you.
Good morning, Natasha Wright with the Medical University of South Carolina. MUSC, through Project Impact, recently hosted the Project Impact Community Engagement Symposium. Many of you were there. And when I went to my leaders about hosting this symposium, they were so excited about it. And we wanted to roll out the red carpet for nonprofits. And so it raises the question for this team: what actionable steps can our employers do to help you in this work? I think the commitment to doing the work is there, but people may not necessarily know where they fit in and what they need to do. For MUSC, it was, hey, we want to bring nonprofits together. We want to make sure they know firsthand what resources are available. We want to take the veil off of it. We don't want to send them to a website. So what actionable steps can our employers, who are benefiting from fee in lieu of taxes in a lot of these counties and bringing their businesses in, how can we get them engaged in this process in an actionable way?
Fantastic question.
I think the first thing is for employers is to step back and look internally as to what type of culture are they trying to build. And the ALICE data is free for everyone. So if you're a nonprofit, feel free to use it and change your recommended guidelines for applicability. But for employers, stepping back and looking at that, we're happy to help, or any of our partners can, identifying what is working with an employer. Have us come in and help us identify what are those flexible benefits components that are there. Identify what are the wages components that need to be there. Having a couple extra days off to be able to stay home when your child is sick and not be labeled an employee who misses a shift and is now unreliable is a huge benefit. Letting people know it's okay to take time off for those reasons is a huge piece. We'd be happy to come in and look at how ALICE should be at work, but we also hear in a few minutes about the Thrive at Work program that we're doing, where we're bringing our family coaches as well as the basket of nonprofits in this program there to augment the EAP programs. And so I think it's a twofold. How do an organization support ALICE? What are they doing long-term to put the right strategies in place to build a culture that says it's okay to take time off and that you have the flexibility you need to meet your family's needs, and at the same time retain those folks long-term through either a combination of wages and benefits, I think would be the key. And we'd be happy to talk about ALICE at Work, which you'll hear about, and Thrive at Work in a little while on that piece. And I think we just got the wave off to wrap it up.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank this incredible panel, each of you sharing your perspectives, your insights, spending time with us together this morning. Really terrific. And I think this was an incredible conversation. Let's give a round of applause, please.